We talk a lot here about hormone optimization, about cortisol curves, about sleep architecture, about the biological waves that decide whether you age fast or age slow. But there's one wave I haven't given enough airtime to, and it might be the most important one of all, your strength wave. So before I tell you what that even means, I want something from you, a real answer, not a great video comment. If you could do one lift for the rest of your life to stay healthy into your 80s and 90s, what would it be? Type it below, one word, one lift, and tell me why, because by the end of this video, I think a few of you are going to change your answer. Health is not a destination, it's a rhythm you learn to ride. We don't just treat symptoms here at VitaWave, we decode your biological waves to turn back the clock from the inside out. And today's wave is one most people misunderstand completely. They think of muscle as vanity, as something for the mirror, for the beach, for the gym selfie, something you chase in your 20s and quietly let go of once life gets busy, once the career, the kids, the mortgage take over, and the gym becomes the first thing to slide off the calendar. I'm going to show you why that thinking is not just outdated, it's dangerous, because muscle isn't decoration. Muscle is medicine, and like any medicine, the less of it you have in your system, the more vulnerable you become to the things that medicine was protecting you from in the first place. Let me ask you something uncomfortable. What do you think actually kills people slowly? Not the dramatic stuff, not the car accident, not the sudden heart attack on the news. I mean the quiet decline. The thing that turns a vibrant 68-year-old into someone who can't get off the floor without help. The thing that turns a confident, independent 75-year-old into someone who's afraid of their own staircase. It's not old age. Old age isn't a diagnosis. It's a cover story, a label we slap on a process that actually has a name, a mechanism, and a timeline. The real culprit has a name, and it's clinical. Sarcopenia, the age-related loss of muscle mass and strength. And here's the wave most people never see coming. After age 30, you can lose 3 to 8% of your muscle mass per decade. After 60, that rate accelerates. By age, some people have lost half of their muscle mass compared to their 20s. Sit with that for a second. Half. Imagine losing half of any other organ and being told that's just normal aging. Half your lung capacity, half your kidney function. We'd call that a crisis. We'd build entire treatment protocols around it. But because muscle loss happens slowly, invisibly, one missed gym session and one skipped protein meal at a time, we've collectively decided to call it inevitable instead of treatable. That's not aging gracefully. That's a slow-motion collapse, and almost nobody is told it's happening until it's already cost them their independence, until the day they can't open a jar, until the day getting up from a low couch requires using both arms and a grunt, until the day a flight of stairs becomes a calculated risk instead of a thoughtless action. Now, I'm not telling you this to scare you. Fear without a path forward is just noise, and we don't do noise here. Fear that doesn't come with a next step just sits in your body as stress, and stress, ironically, accelerates the very decline we're talking about. So I want to be very precise about why I'm telling you this. I'm telling you this because muscle is one of the most trainable, most responsive systems in your entire body at any age. This isn't a good genetic story. This is a you have more control than you've been told story. Out of every system in your body, muscle might be the most honest one. It doesn't care about your excuses, but it also doesn't hold grudges. It responds to the signal you send it, starting almost immediately, regardless of how long you've neglected it. Here's the proof. Researchers have looked at people in their 90s. Yes, their 90s, starting resistance training for the first time in their lives. People who had never lifted a weight, who had spent decades assuming their decline was simply the cost of getting old. Within weeks, strength gains. Within months, measurable increases in muscle fiber size. Some of these participants doubled their leg strength in a matter of months. The body doesn't stop listening to the signal. It just doesn't get the signal. Think about what that actually means. It means the gap between where you are now and where your body is capable of being isn't closed because of age. It's open because of silence, because the signal that tells your muscles to grow and adapt simply hasn't been sent in years, sometimes decades. Muscle tissue isn't just lifting groceries or looking toned, it's metabolically active tissue. It's where your body disposes of blood sugar. In fact, skeletal muscle is responsible for the majority of glucose uptake after a meal, which means more muscle is one of the most direct tools you have against insulin resistance. It's a reservoir of amino acids your body rage during illness or injury, which is part of why people with low muscle mass tend to recover so much more slowly from surgery, from infection, from any major physical stress. It's directly tied to your resting metabolic rate, your bone density, your balance, your fall risk, and this is the part almost nobody talks about, your hormone signaling. Strength training triggers a cascade: growth hormone, testosterone, IGF-1, even insulin sensitivity.
all respond to resistant stimulus. You are not just building biceps, you are sending a full-body chemical signal that says stay young, stay capable, stay needed. And your endocrine system listens, it recalibrates, it treats that signal as evidence that this body still has work to do, still has a reason to maintain itself at a higher level of function. That's why I call it your strength wave. It's not a single workout, it's a rhythm, a recurring signal you send your biology over and over that determines which direction your aging curve bends. One direction leads toward frailty, dependence, and a shrinking radius of what your body can safely do. The other leads to a kind of aging where your 70s look more like an extension of your 50s than a steep decline from them. And there's a piece of this that almost nobody connects to muscle at all, your brain. Skeletal muscle, when it contracts under load, releases signaling molecules that cross into your bloodstream and influence brain function, compounds tied to the growth of new neurons, to mood regulation, to protection against cognitive decline. Some of the same researchers studying sarcopenia have found that grip strength alone, measured decades before any diagnosis, predicts cognitive outcomes later in life. Not because grip strength itself protects your brain, but because it's a proxy for how much of this whole body signaling system has stayed active over the years. The muscle isn't separate from the mind here. It's talking to it constantly in a language we're only beginning to understand. There's also the matter of inflammation. Chronic low-grade inflammation is one of the quiet engines behind almost every disease associated with aging, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, even certain cancers and neurodegenerative conditions.
Researchers sometimes call it inflammaging, and muscle tissue, when it's active and being used, behaves almost like an endocrine organ in its own right, releasing compounds that actively dampen that inflammatory load. Less muscle, used less often, tends to mean a body that runs hotter with inflammation, all else being equal. More muscle, used consistently, tends to mean a body better equipped to keep that fire low. So how do you actually build this wave? Let's get specific, because vague advice doesn't change lives. Stay active is not a strategy. Move more is not a protocol. I want to give you something you can actually act on this week. First, resistance, not just movement. Walking is wonderful. Cardio is wonderful. They protect your heart, your lungs, your mood, and I'm not here to talk you out of either. But neither one sends a strong enough signal to preserve muscle. Your body needs mechanical tension, a real load it has to fight against, a resistance significant enough that your muscle fibers experience genuine stress and have to adapt to handle it next time. That's the trigger sarcopenia doesn't have an answer for. You can walk 10,000 steps a day for the rest of your life and still lose muscle mass year over year, because walking simply doesn't ask enough of your muscle fibers to justify your body investing in keeping them. Second, frequency over intensity, especially as you age. You don't need to destroy yourself in the gym. In fact, that often backfires. Too much stress, not enough recovery, and the signal gets lost in the noise of inflammation. A workout so brutal you can barely move for 4 days isn't a stronger signal, it's often a worse one, because your body spends so much energy just managing the damage that there's little left over for actual adaptation. What works is consistency. 2 to 4 sessions a week, hitting the major muscle groups, progressively asking a little more of your body than last time. Not maximally more, just a little. A slightly heavier weight, 1 more rep, a few more seconds under tension. Small, repeated, sustainable asks, compounding over months and years. That's the first half of the loop. There's a second half, and it's the part almost everyone skips. Stay with me, because this is where most well-intentioned strength routines quietly fail. Third, protein is the messenger, not just the fuel. Here's something that surprises people. As we age, our bodies become less efficient at using protein to build muscle, a phenomenon researchers call anabolic resistance, which means the protein intake that worked fine for you at 25 may not be enough at 55 or 65. Your body needs a clearer, louder message to actually build with what you're giving it. You can do everything right in the gym and still plateau, simply because the raw material and the signal that material sends isn't loud enough to get through. This isn't about extreme diets or complicated meal plans. It's about recognizing that the protein conversation changes as you age, and most people never update it. Fourth, recovery is when the wave actually crests. You don't build muscle in the gym. You break it down in the gym. You build it in your sleep, in your rest days, in the hours where your body is quietly repairing what you challenged. This is the piece that gets the least credit and does the most work. Sleep is when growth hormone release peaks. Rest days are when the actual remodeling happens, when your body takes the raw stimulus from training and the raw material from protein and turns them into the muscle tissue itself. Skip that part and you're sending a signal with no time to receive it. You're asking your body a question and then walking away before it has a chance to answer. Put those 4 pieces together and you're not just working out. You're riding a wave. Load, frequency, protein, recovery. On repeat, indefinitely. That's the rhythm. That's the medicine. And like any medicine, the dose matters less than the consistency. A small, sustainable dose taken reliably for years will outperform a massive dose taken once and abandoned. There's a 5th element underneath all 4 of these that rarely gets named directly. Progression. Your body adapts specifically to the demand you place on it, which means the exact same workout, repeated identically forever, eventually stops being a stimulus at all. It becomes maintenance at best. To keep building, or even to keep what you have from slowly eroding, there has to be some form of progressive overload over time. That doesn't mean constantly chasing heavier and heavier weights at any cost. It means more controlled repetitions, slower lowering phases, shorter rest periods, or simply better technique that recruits the target muscle more effectively. The principle is the same regardless of the method. Your body needs evidence, session after session, that the demand on it is real and ongoing, not static. I want to bring this back to something real, because numbers and mechanisms only matter if you feel why they matter. You can know every statistic I've just given you and still not change a single habit, because facts alone rarely move people. What moves people is picturing themselves inside the outcome. Picture 2 versions of yourself at 75. In one version, you're the person who can still get down on the floor to play with a grandchild and get back up without thinking about it, without needing to brace against furniture, without that flicker of calculation before you commit to the movement. You can carry your own luggage through an airport, lift it into an overhead bin without asking a stranger for help. You walk into a room and people don't worry about you. You don't worry about you. In the other version, a fall isn't just a fall, it's a hip fracture. And a hip fracture, statistically, is one of the most dangerous events that can happen to an older adult, not because of the break itself, but because of what follows. Loss of mobility, loss of independence, extended hospital stays that further accelerate muscle loss in a vicious cycle where weakness causes the fall and the fall causes more weakness. A cascade that for too many people ends far sooner than it should have, not because of disease, not because of bad luck, but because of a body that simply didn't have enough reserve left to absorb the shock. The difference between those 2 futures isn't luck. It's not even mostly genetics. A massive part of that difference is decided by the muscle you build or fail to build starting right now, today, at whatever age you're watching this. Not at some future point when life calms down, not after the next milestone, right now with whatever time and energy you actually have available. That's the part that should genuinely unsettle you, not in a doom scroll anxious way, in a I get to do something about this way. Because unlike so many risk factors in medicine, this one is largely within your control, starting from your very next workout. Think about the small moments that actually make up a life well lived in your later decades, not the dramatic ones, the small, almost invisible ones.
Getting down onto the floor with a grandchild and not having to think about how you'll get back up. Walking a city you've never visited and choosing to take the stairs because you want to, not avoiding them because you have to. Carrying your own bags, opening your own jars, standing at a stove cooking a full meal without your lower back announcing its opinion halfway through. None of these moments make it into a retirement brochure. None of them get celebrated the way a big trip or a big purchase does. But collectively, they are what independence actually feels like, day to day, and every one of them is quietly underwritten by the muscle you're carrying. Now let me get ahead of what you're thinking, because I know this audience, and I know the objections that show up right about now. I've heard every one of these, and I want to take each one seriously instead of brushing past it. I'm too old to start. You're not. The research on resistance training in people in their 70s, 80s, even 90s shows real, measurable strength gains, often faster proportionally than in younger people, because there's so much capacity that's gone untapped. The body you have right now, at whatever age you're at, still has the machinery to adapt. That machinery doesn't get permanently switched off. It just gets quiet from disuse. I don't have access to a gym. You don't need one.
Bodyweight squats, resistance bands, even rising from a chair without using your hands, these are legitimate strength stimuli when programmed correctly. The signal matters more than the equipment. Some of the most meaningful strength gains in research on older adults have come from interventions using nothing more than body weight and household objects. The barrier was never really the equipment, it was the belief that you needed it. I'm worried about getting hurt. This is real, and it deserves respect, not dismissal. So many people carry an old injury, a joint concern, or simply a fear born from watching someone else get hurt. The answer isn't to avoid resistance training. The answer is to start light, prioritize form, and progress slowly, ideally with guidance if you're newer to it. The injury risk of not building strength, falls, fractures, frailty, is, over a lifetime, far greater than the injury risk of a well-programmed strength routine. Avoiding the gym to avoid injury often guarantees a different, larger injury later. I don't have time. This one deserves its own honest answer. 2 sessions a week, even 30 to 40 minutes each, is enough to move the needle meaningfully when done consistently over time. This isn't asking for 2 hours a day. It's asking for a small, recurring slice of your week, protected the way you'd protect any other non-negotiable appointment. I tried it before and didn't see results. This one is one of the most common and one of the most fixable. Almost always when I dig into what someone actually did, the issue wasn't effort, it was structure. Random workouts with no progression, no tracking, no clear plan for increasing demand over time will plateau quickly, and that plateau gets misread as "this doesn't work for me," rather than "this particular approach wasn't structured to keep working." The body responds to a real signal. If the signal stayed flat, the results stayed flat too. That's not a verdict on your body, it's a verdict on the plan. Every excuse in this list feels protective. Every single one of them comes from a reasonable place. Caution, limited time, limited resources, a body that doesn't feel as reliable as it used to. But every one of them, left unaddressed, leads to the same place. Less muscle, less resilience, less time spent independent. The kindest thing I can tell you is also the most uncomfortable one. The safest path is the one that includes the resistance you're avoiding. Before we close this out, one more piece, because I promised real value, not just motivation. Most people who do start strength training make one mistake that quietly caps their results. They program it like a 25-year-old would, even at 55 or 65. Same volume, same recovery windows, same go-heavy every session mentality, borrowed from a gym culture built around young, fast-recovering bodies. They follow programs designed for people whose anabolic resistance hasn't kicked in yet, whose joints haven't accumulated decades of wear and tear, whose recovery windows are simply short by default. Here's the adjustment. As anabolic resistance increases with age, the smarter move isn't to lift less, it's to prioritize intensity within safe range over sheer volume, and to extend recovery between sessions hitting the same muscle group. 2 well-executed sessions per muscle group with full recovery between consistently outperforms 5 rushed ones squeezed in without adequate rest. Quality of signal matters more than quantity of sessions. That's a small shift, but it's the difference between a strength wave that builds and one that plateaus, or worse, leads to injury and burnout that takes you out of the game entirely. I've seen people start with enormous motivation, overtrain in the first few weeks because they're following advice meant for a much younger body, and quit within a month, convinced that strength training is just not for them. It wasn't the training that failed, it was the dosage. There's a second part of this adjustment that matters just as much: warm-up and tissue preparation. A 25-year-old's connective tissue tends to tolerate going from cold to working weight with little ceremony. That tolerance narrows with age, not because your body has become fragile, but because tendons and joints simply need more deliberate preparation to perform at their best and stay injury-free. A few extra minutes of mobility work and lighter warm-up sets aren't wasted time. They're part of the signal itself. They tell your body, we're about to do something real, and they give your tissue a chance to be ready for it instead of being surprised by it. Skipping this step is one of the quiet reasons people get discouraged early, not because the training itself was wrong, but because the entry into it was too abrupt. So, go back to that question I asked you at the start. If you could only do one lift for the rest of your life, some of you said squats, and honestly, that's a strong answer because nothing mimics real-life function like the ability to sit and stand under control.
Every time you get out of a chair, off a toilet, out of a car, you're performing a version of that movement. Losing the ability to do it well is one of the clearest early markers of declining independence. Some of you said deadlifts because almost everything in daily life is a hinge pattern in disguise. The way you bend to lift something off the floor day after day for decades either protects your back or slowly wears it down, depending on whether that pattern has been trained. But the truth underneath the question was never really the best lift. The point was getting you to think about your strength wave as something you're actively riding or actively neglecting every single day, whether you notice it or not. There is no neutral. You're either sending the signal or you're not. There's no pause button where your muscle simply waits patiently for you to come back to it.
There is no version of healthy aging, no version of turning back the clock that doesn't run directly through muscle. You can optimize every hormone panel, fix every sleep cycle, dial in every supplement, and if you let your strength wave flatline, you're still heading toward frailty. Muscle is the foundation everything else sits on. It's the floor beneath the rest of your health strategy, and no amount of work on the floors above can compensate for a foundation that's quietly crumbling. I say this as someone who has watched both directions play out over and over in the people I work with. The ones who treat strength training as optional, as something to return to once things calm down, tend to find that things never quite calm down, and the gap between where they are and where they could be just keeps widening, quietly, in the background, while life happens. The ones who treat it as non-negotiable, even in small, modest doses, tend to find that everything else gets easier. Their energy holds up, their joints feel more reliable, their confidence in their own body, the simple, unspoken trust that it will do what they ask of it, stays intact in a way that becomes rarer and rarer among their peers as the years go on. Here's the deepest reframe I want to leave you with. Stop thinking about strength training as something you do to your body, like a punishment or a chore on a checklist. So many people relate to exercise as an act of self-correction, something you do because you ate too much, because you feel guilty, because you're trying to fix something that's wrong with you. That relationship rarely lasts because nobody sustains a habit built on guilt for very long. Start thinking about it instead as a conversation you're having with your body, one where you are the one setting the tone. Every session is a message. I want to stay capable. I want to stay independent. I want to be the version of myself who doesn't have to think twice about getting off the floor, who doesn't have to ask for help carrying something, who gets to move through the world without negotiating with their own limitations. Skip it long enough, and your body hears a different message, one of decline, one of this signal isn't needed anymore. And biology, true to form, takes you at your word. It's remarkably literal. It doesn't maintain capacity it doesn't see being used. It allocates resources toward what gets demanded of it and quietly withdraws them from what doesn't. That's the real meaning behind health is not a destination, it's a rhythm. Your strength wave doesn't reward a single big effort, a single dramatic transformation, a single 90-day program completed and then abandoned. It rewards the recurring, almost boring consistency of showing up, lift after lift, week after week, year after year, until one day you realize you're 70 or 80 and you're still the one carrying the groceries, not the one being carried, still the one getting down on the floor to play, not the one watching from the chair because getting up again feels uncertain. And maybe that's the most important thing to understand about this entire conversation. Nobody arrives at frailty through one bad decision, and nobody arrives at strength through one good one either. Both are the compound result of thousands of small, repeated signals, sent or not sent, week after week, for decades. The version of you at 75 isn't being decided by some dramatic event in the future. It's being decided incrementally right now by whether you choose to send the signal today, and then again next week, and then again the week after that, long after the motivation of watching this video has faded, and all that's left is the habit itself. Hit subscribe. If this reframed how you think about muscle, I want to know. Drop your one lift answer in the comments, even if it's already changed from when this video started. Tell me what shifted and why. I read every single one, and your comments are genuinely what tells YouTube this conversation matters, so more people get to hear it. More people get the chance to rethink something that might be quietly shaping the next 30 or 40 years of their life. And if you want the next piece of this puzzle, how your strength wave actually talks to your hormone wave, and why training the wrong way at the wrong time of your cycle or your day can blunt your results, that video is waiting for you right here. Until then, keep riding the rhythm. I'll see you in the next one.